And certainly HP's given up the ghost. And that's part of the competition from Taiwanese and Korean companies. Okay, then we get to the new millennium. What's happened in the last few years? Well, China, of course, is the news. But I think by now you kind of see a pattern. I hope you see a pattern. China doesn't come out of nowhere. China is not a mystery. China is not, I mean, it wasn't inevitable, but once it starts going, it just gets on the roller coaster and starts heading out. Okay, so China industrializes. As I said last time a bit, China, most of the industry in the 80s is domestic industry for the domestic market, and it's a lot of, kind of like Britain and the United States. Stuff they were already making in Maoist state factories, like bicycles and refrigerators. Only now they make even more of them. They start pumping them out, and then motorbikes, and so on, and bricks, so you can build your little house in the village with cinder blocks, and so on. They invite foreign industry into Guangdong, into these special zones like Shenzhen, right in the early 80s, and those start to take off. And now they're watching these foreign companies. They bring in Chinese workers. They're producing Toyotas or GM cars or whatever. They're all in there, Nissan and so on, and other things, same kind of electrical equipment and so on. And they start to get the benefits of working in these factories and start, girls, ladies, and they start watching what's going on and learning the technology and doing joint ventures and so on, seeing if it's going to work. Yes. Oh, did Richard Nixon have any impact? No. I don't think so, no. He's there too early. It's really the fall of Mao, the collapse of the Maoist system. And then Deng Xiaoping comes back from being humiliated and exiled and comes back in and puts into place the reform system. Basically, now, of course, it might have had some impact in the sense that China had mostly looked to Russia up until that point and ignored the West. And it may have gotten them looking more to the West and saying, oh, my God, they're way ahead of us. How can we get some of that? I think that did have an impact. Okay, so they're starting to learn from foreigners. Now, a lot of the foreign industry comes in by the late 80s and into the 90s is Taiwanese and Hong Kong factories. And Hong Kong was this tremendous industrial complex in that little city of clothing, famous Hong Kong clothing industry, shoes, and electrical stuff. And immediately the Hong Kong guys start offshoring or inshoring factories into southern China. And similarly, Taiwan, once they get permission, they start roaring into mostly Fujian province, right across the straits there, putting their factories in, employing this massive amount of much cheaper labor. They've got the techniques, they've got the factories, they know how to do it, they've got the markets, and they take advantage of Chinese labor by moving in there. All the while, of course, still improving their techniques and all. So when we talk about foreign industry in China, it's not so much American industry or German industry, although there is some. It's Hong Kong and Taiwanese in the main. And then by the 2000s, the Chinese are really starting to stand on their own feet with their own companies and their own technologies, starting to move up the technological curve to do electronics and so on. They're not a huge electronics powerhouse yet, but they do have a lot of electronics factories. For instance, in this morning's paper, the announcement was that Solyndra, which had gotten this huge loan under the Obama stimulus package, built a new factory, with 2 factories in Fremont here in the Bay Area, to crank out solar electric cells, which were different because they weren't flat, they were tubes or something. I don't know exactly how you employ those, maybe someone of you knows. But anyway, they just went belly up. And they went belly up because their production cost per unit, per watt of solar power is just practically double what these Chinese companies are doing now. So that means the Chinese companies are doing a pretty sophisticated kind of, it's not as high-tech as designing the software that goes into your iPad. But it certainly is pretty high-tech manufacturing, and they're doing it, their own companies, very well, and doing it for their own market and exporting it. And they managed to knock out that company. In the 2000s, China, that's when we all wake up in the West. Here comes China because it starts exporting, as I said last time. Now, it had exported already, but suddenly the exports, as I showed you last time, just take off because they got the trade agreements under the WTO, 2001. But more is going on than that. There's also much more privatization. A lot of the old SOE, state-owned enterprises, have gone under, the bad ones, the inefficient ones. But the successful ones are now selling shares on the stock market. China starts to have a stock market. You start to have new companies coming out of nowhere, like Lenovo, sorry. Lesoto's a country. What am I doing? Sorry, a little brain freeze there. Lenovo, which is a little nothing company, private company, and then it bought IBM's PC branch, and it's out there producing computers today. China suddenly becomes the new workshop of the world. Why? Because it now has thousands of factories employing tens and hundreds of thousands of people. It also has one of the most fantastic real estate booms in history. Its construction industry is a major sector. The building of cities is a major industrial activity. Like cement, all that cement, China is by far the biggest cement producer in the world. What does the cement go to? Not to electronics factories so much. It goes to building roads, overpasses, and giant skyscrapers that tilt. Or whatever. There's Beijing construction. I love that's a price of real estate in the 2000s in Beijing. So tremendous. These major cities from Shenzhen up to Beijing and beyond. Now these gigantic skylines of skyscrapers. They've tripled and quadrupled in size and so on. Now there's an argument within China today, a very important question about China's ability to develop enough of an internal market to make it less dependent on exports. Their government wants to be less dependent because look, the U.S. isn't doing well. We're not buying as much of their stuff. So maybe it would be better if they bought their own stuff. Now we'll talk later about national consumption, about rates of investment. Chinese rate of savings investment is just ridiculous. It's off the charts. And they have a real problem because they're really good at building more factories, and they're not good enough at absorbing their own output. And in fact, this is a problem all through East Asia. But it's even a problem in Germany, which is why punishing Greece is actually a stupid move for Germany, because Germany needs Europe to buy its goods, but it doesn't like to bail them out. It thinks that's their fault. That's a longer story. One of the things the Chinese government did, even before the crisis of the Great Recession, but really in spades in the last few years, is expand their infrastructure. Highways and rail lines, freight lines, ports, high-speed rail. In the 90s, they concentrated on ports and certain rail lines. In the 2000s, it's been this network of basically French railroads, same thing that France has already done. They also were behind, but catching up very quickly, building these high-speed trains, which inconveniently ran into each other a few weeks ago, which has not helped the image of this. But they tried to build these train lines. They have gigantic train line went all the way up into Tibet. What's this about? It's partly opening up the internal areas to build more factories there, to incorporate more peasants and villages and towns in the interior, and also develop the internal market. It's very clear that's what they're trying to do. So it may be great in Shanghai, we have these malls like this, but they're trying to develop the national market and tie together the whole country, even out development, which is very uneven, very lumpy in the east, but I'll talk about that when I talk about regions. South and Southeast Asia come on in the came on very rapidly in the late 2000s. I kind of put this aside because Hong Kong and Singapore are sort of in Southeast Asia, not really Northeast. They're often talked about in the same breath as Korea and Taiwan because they develop about the same time. But they're actually different in that they are city-states, not big nations. And they are pivotal linchpins for regions. In Hong Kong's case, for southern China, China Sea, and for Singapore's case, for all of Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, and all of that area, Indonesia, and so on. These are the key hubs, financial hubs, commercial hubs. We'll talk more about that when we talk more about cities, but that's what they are. And they grew very fast, as you can see from this chart, along with Taiwan and South Korea, back starting in the 60s. And then Southeast Asia starts to come on strong after about 1985, for reasons I won't go into. But a lot of Japanese factories, this is very important, Japanese factories are offshore to places like Thailand and Malaysia. KL has a lot of big factory zones around it. And that starts to kickstart Southeast Asia. Malaysia and Thailand above all, but also Indonesia, the Philippines, they have a harder time of it. They're much bigger, more diverse countries with lots of a lot of landlords and backward social elements and so on. And now Vietnam, of course, Vietnam's modernizing very quickly as China offshores and Hong Kong capital offshores factories into Vietnam to get even cheaper labor. The Chinese are now worrying about their labor being too expensive. India, India developed steadily during its kind of post-war nationalist independent period. And I'll talk more about that kind of strategy of, it's kind of like Latin America and East Asia did, capital controls, import controls, trying to do it more an ISI or autarkic vision. And it's a big country, so they could do it up to a point. But starting in the 1980s, they started to think about liberalizing more. They open up markets. And indeed, after 1990, with the liberalization, and it has to do with the breakup of the Congress Party, it's weakening at that period. So there's a politics to this. And you can see Indian growth trends suddenly shoot up very dramatically. That's GDP per capita. That's the trend line from 60 to now 80. But notice actually it takes off before 1990 in the liberalization. So don't think that it's all about free markets. Okay, it's not. India was poised to start to get onto the bandwagon, and it has in amazing ways. That's a picture of Bangalore. Freeways, it's totally modernized, big chunks of it, huge industrial parks, and so on. A lot of high tech, leading sectors, heavy industry, electronic, and of course you've all heard about the back offices. But that works. They speak English, have a lot of trained people who can answer your questions about Comcast. And I'm happy to say the last time I had a problem, it worked. If I had to depend on Comcast itself, I'd be in big trouble. So what does this all mean in my last 5 minutes? Actually, my watch says I have 8 minutes. I don't like having a fast clock there, but okay. It's good for you, bad for me. What happens when you start to industrialize the world? What's the implication of this? I mean, in one sense, it's great. It's all positive. It's growth. It's more stuff, more people getting better off. Just as has happened for the last 200 years or more people getting better off. With a downside. Remember, I talked about downside of markets. Well, one of the downsides of industrialization of everybody is that it creates more capacity on a world scale, which means more output, which means more goods duking it out for the same market. Now, of course, the market's growing, but does it grow fast enough to absorb all those goods? And that is the kicker. So, when Germany and Japan come booming up in the 50s and 60s, suddenly the U.S. starts to feel it. There starts to be a glut of world exports. And the U.S. share of exports starts to go down. I think that's what that is. No, that's our trade balance. We go from a positive trade balance around 1970 to a negative. What is it today? Very negative. What has it been ever since the 70s? Pretty much negative. Now, it's most of the 2000s, the 90s, it's been catastrophically negative. I mean, we're talking like $500 billion a month or something. No, 500, what is it? No, that can't be right. Can it be right? No, that can't be right. What could be right? It's something catastrophic. Okay. I'll have those figures another day. That's embarrassing. Anyway, so Germany catches up with the U.S. as an exporter by 1970, Japan by 1980. And suddenly they're all fighting for a world market. What happens? Well, you can read Robert Brenner's book on this whole era, The Economics of Global Turbulence. We'll tell you the story in painful detail. And that's why I didn't assign it to you. So count your blessings, but it's very good. He's a good historian. And what happens is profits fall. If there's too many goods on the world market, prices start to get squeezed. That's the graph of global prices from 62 to, I think, 80-something, going mostly down, zigzag down. U.S. profit rate here, is that the U.S.? Yeah. Manufacturing profit rate falls by half from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. What happens? There's a huge crisis. The post-war American glory days end in the early 1970s. That's when Nixon goes to China, by the way. But what Nixon does that's even more important than becoming that nobody's written an opera about yet, is the dollar crisis. I'm waiting for John Adams to do this. He's a very clever guy. A dollar crisis of 70-75, where the U.S. basically pulls the plug on fixed exchange rates, which we'll talk about another day, and lets the dollar sink to make American goods cheaper, to screw, that's another economics term, Germany, to put the screws to, okay, I don't want to take any sexual connotation, put the screws to Japan and Germany. And guess what? It really works. Oh, Japan is really screwed. Briefly. Unfortunately, Japan comes roaring back. The U.S. suffers terrible stagflation, as they called it then, although compared to the 2000s, the 70s was still like a dream world of prosperity. And we suddenly get this recession in the around 1980, with massive deindustrialization. Suddenly, huge swaths of American industry are wiped out. One fell swoop. And it's weird because the theories of these crises are that OPEC did it. The Arabs did it. They raised it. It was because of the Arab-Israeli war in 73. OPEC got together. They raised oil prices. That's what caused all the problem. No. That caused about 1% of a recession where the GDP dropped by many percent. And so it just doesn't explain it. What explains it best is the world glut of capacity that cannot be absorbed. It's also not the end of the Vietnam War. Also is not what causes it. Okay. So, but after 75, the glut continues. Why? Because here comes Taiwan. Here comes Korea. Here comes Hong Kong. Oh my God. Here comes China. And the glut just goes on and on. And they even find, first we call them the newly industrialized countries. America wakes up to that, and economists and academics. Now the financiers, by the 1990s, call them emerging economies. That sounds kind of better. I don't know. We're a good place to put your money. But the facts are the same. And look at the growth rates. This is for 85 to 05, basically, before the Great Recession. Look at the growth rates. The emerging economies are much, much faster in aggregate, heading upward in their GDP increase per year. Here's the developed economy just pooping along around 2 to 3%. The emerging economies getting up from 5 to 7%. That's a huge leap. Talk about world turned upside down again. That's what we're getting. Oh, I just threw that in to show you that in today's, it's not all China's fault. Look who we're competing with. We're still a big exporter. Germany is the world's biggest exporter. It's those damn Germans. Whoever complains about the Germans. Only for those damn Germans, everything will be okay. No, well, we can't blame the Chinese, right? Okay, I'm not going to do that. Wait a second, don't you go anywhere. Americans discovered globalization by the 1980s. First with Japan, then with China. They go, where do all these goods come from? Where do these people come from? Why is my factory closing? And they get all up in arms about this. But the rest of the world, of course, had suffered globalization from Europe and from us for 500 years. So we're all of a sudden surprised. And here's a typical kind of graph, surviving the onslaught. And here, you notice how they portray somebody in Asia. Some like guy in a grass skirt goes sneeze and the financial markets collapse. Well, it isn't like that. And the U.S. is still the number one economy, but we have this real problem of our trade balance being lousy, of our dollar balance, payments balance being lousy, the dollar weakening, our industrial base not keeping up. And that could be really a fatal problem. And we'll continue to talk about that. Okay, see you next week.